I'm Sabrina, and here are some of my experiences this spring in ECS 110. 2 months ago, if you would have asked me any normal narrative, I would repeat it with complete confidence, believing it to be the only truth. Now, although I see things more clearly, my head is a jumbled mess of thoughts and feelings about everything to do with the norm and what the norm is supposed to look like. I am a middle-class, able, white, heterosexual female, and these identities bring me many advantages every day that are just hidden beneath the surface of our thoughts, actions, and reactions. When I was a little girl, I remember my dad playing a game with my sister and I. We would spin the globe, and wherever our finger landed was where we would live/travel to. After the game, he would sit us down and explain that although these other places are nice and pretty, Canada is the best place to live for many reasons. One of the first realizations I had in this class was that my parents repeat a lot of common rebuttals and normal narratives. One example was when I asked my mom how she got to where she was today.
I would just say hard work and determination.
Her response, an ignorance to white privilege and treaties, was actually a common rebuttal, which I learned later in the course. One rainy evening, I sat 20 minutes from home listening to a grad speech that seemed like I'd heard before. I began to laugh when the speech drew near and the normal narratives of Canada were thick in the air. As young graduates, you have high expectations to live up to as Canadians. You need to be polite, hold a door open for someone, be accepting of other cultures too. Now that I'm no longer in the dark, I see how ridiculous these stories are and how ironic they are coming from a white man. Gender stereotypes are always something that I know existed, but I've never really seen them play out in my life and definitely never felt the need to disrupt them because that's just the way things are. Now, I see gender roles being followed every day at the daycare where I work, like when a boy farts and it's accepted because he's just being a boy. I also see these norms being disrupted, like when a boy wore nail polish, fighting the norm that boys don't wear nail polish because it's seen as feminine. I also see myself following these myths, like one morning when I walked into the daycare and asked the little girl if her mom had done her hair because it looked so pretty. As soon as the words came out of my mouth, I stopped dead in my tracks. I began disrupting this myth myself, thinking, why would I say that? It just reinforced that girls are supposed to be rewarded for looking pretty and that only a mom could possibly have done her hair because that's what a mom would do. When I first read the title of an article about a professor speaking on suicide, I assumed it would be from a white man's perspective because that's just what comes to my mind when I think of a professor's speech going viral. When I opened the link, I was shocked to see this man's picture in the top right corner. My initial thought wasn't anything to do with suicide or how he had made his suicide attempts public. It was that, oh wow, he's a professor, good for him. This is a norm that's spread, that if a non-white person has a successful life, then they are doing well for their race. I instantly wished I could take the thought back. Now I know how harmful a small thought like that is to myself and to society too. Just last week, I was sitting at a table at my boyfriend's with his family having supper. Previously, him and I alone had been talking about the hard conversations we discussed in this class and our differing views on the many topics. He poured me some water, we talked about nothing, and then he made a comment to his dad about an Indian giver. My eyes grew wide as the words came out of his mouth. He looked at me as if expecting a reaction, but wondering how much I'd say in front of his parents. A voice inside my head said, "Hold your tongue, Sabrina. Don't say something that will make them give you a funny look." A different voice said, "Speak up, Sabrina. Say what you think is right." No, this isn't the time and place. If this isn't the time, then when is? To his surprise and my own, I spoke up. His mother chimed in to tell him not to say those kinds of things around the wrong type of person, that kind of person being me, one who would fire back to correct the racism being brought to the front. I held my ground as we discussed what an Indian giver even meant, and after that one small conversation, I'm a little more confident to speak out on what I know will be many future occasions. In my 19 years, I have seen many movies with white heroes and non-white underdogs, but I've never thought that that was what was exactly being portrayed in the story until I watched Sean's Mythbuster. His was the most busting Mythbuster and one of the most disruptive things that I've read and watched in this class. It was on white people in movies saving non-whites or being a necessary factor for non-white people to reach their goals. My mouth dropped when I understood what he was talking about in some of the movies that I had seen. When I realized I had still been ignoring something so big like this, it made me think what other normal narratives are being told that I still haven't noticed that need to be disrupted in my life. This course has taught me how to disrupt my norms, question everything, and how to have courageous conversations. Some of us are willfully ignorant, ignoring the disruptions of our norms because we think the norm is the only way. Even I still, myself, reinforce some of these norms, but I'm beginning to recognize them more and more and beginning to disrupt some. The most important things to take away from this class for me would be to keep your eyes and ears open to what's happening around us and to educate yourself as much as possible so you can, like me, be no longer in the dark.